3 days. That's all it took for me to know that something real is happening in Cleveland, and I'm not sure the rest of the NFL world has caught up to it yet. 3 days of OTAs, every clip I could get my hands on, every field report, every carefully worded non-answer from the coaching staff, and I'm sitting here telling you that what's unfolding inside that building is not a quarterback competition in the traditional sense. It's bigger than that. It's a franchise staring at itself in the mirror and trying to decide if it has the courage to say out loud what its own eyes are showing it. Let's start with Shedeur Sanders, because that's where my conviction is sitting right now. For months, people have been running the arm strength conversation into the ground, velocity debates, tight window discussions, people pulling up Colorado tape like they've personally stood in an NFL huddle and felt what that environment demands. I've watched every rep I could find from these 3 days, and I'm going to say this clearly and move on. That conversation is dead. It was probably always more manufactured than real, but after what I've seen this week, it's just gone. What Shedeur actually has, and this is something that cannot be coached into a quarterback who doesn't already possess it, is touch. Legitimate, receiver-friendly touch. The ball doesn't arrive like a missile punishing hands on a shallow cross. It drops in right on time, placed exactly where only the intended man can reach it. And what keeps standing out to me across these sessions is that he knows when to dial it up and when to take something off. He's not throwing a fastball when a changeup gets the job done. That is not a weakness. That is football IQ that most quarterbacks spend their entire first contract trying to develop, and this kid walked in with it already installed. There was one throw to Carson Ryan, the rookie tight end out of BYU, that made me stop and rewind it. Nothing flashy about it. No crowd noise, no big reaction. Just a perfectly timed, precisely placed professional throw that told me everything about how Shedeur understands leverage, spacing, and what a receiver actually needs in a single moment. Not what the play diagram says. What the receiver needs, right there. That's the gap between a guy who makes highlight reels and a guy who wins you a late-season game in brutal weather. That throw lived in that gap. And the chemistry building, this is where it gets genuinely interesting. Early in any spring installation, you start identifying which connections are forming naturally. Who's becoming the security blanket? Who does the quarterback find? Instinctively, when the design play breaks down, through 3 days, 2 threads keep surfacing clearly. Shedeur to Trail on Wallace, the veteran who came over from Baltimore, and Shedeur to Carson Ryan. 2 completely different body types, 2 different areas of the field, 2 separate skill sets, and he's finding both of them organically. That's not a coordinator scripting reps to pre-approve targets. That's a quarterback actually feeling where the offense breathes. Harold Fentress hasn't been out there, and that matters. He and Shedeur built something real together last year. But here's the thing that tells me more than any individual throw: when your best tight end isn't available and your quarterback is still generating genuine chemistry with guys he barely knows yet, that's not a quarterback surviving an offense. That's a quarterback operating one, with authority. Now, I have to talk about Deshaun Watson, and I'm going to give you the full, honest picture, not the hot take version in either direction. The social media output from Cleveland over these 3 days has been heavily weighted toward Watson clips. The volume, the placement, the consistency of it. Somebody is making deliberate editorial choices about what goes in front of people's eyes. That's not a conspiracy. Every NFL media operation does it. But it means you have to weigh the highlight packages against what the reporters who are actually standing on that field are writing. Those are 2 different data streams, and they are not telling the same story. Here's what I'll say without hesitation. Deshaun Watson is throwing the football well right now. Really well. I'm not going to let prior narrative do my analysis for me. The mechanics look clean, the release looks healthy, and his body is doing things that honestly surprised me given everything he's been through. The weight transfer grabbed my attention first. When a quarterback is coming back from serious injury, and we're talking about a man who has now torn both Achilles tendons, which is a sentence I genuinely struggle to say out loud, the thing you look for before anything else is hesitation. The body protecting itself without the brain even issuing the command. A back foot that plants short, A follow-through that pulls slightly early. I'm not seeing any of that from Watson right now. When he steps into a throw, he steps into it completely. The deep ball to Jamari Thrash was impressive, but the crossbody throw to Isaiah Bond away from his frame with velocity and placement, that requires full shoulder trust, full rotational confidence. You cannot manufacture that delivery. A quarterback secretly protecting his body does not make that throw look effortless. So here's the honest statement. Deshaun Watson in a controlled environment, no live pass rush, helmets, and shorts in May, looks like a capable NFL quarterback. And I said months ago that Watson might be the best quarterback in this league at performing in exactly this setting. The spring install, the 7-on-7, the early OTA environment. That is not shade. That is a real observation. He has lived inside more of these periods than almost anyone playing the game. Of course, he looked sharp in May. I expected it. But the Watson conversation cannot live only in that clean, controlled space. This is a 30-year-old quarterback who has played in fewer than 30% of his team's games since the league went to 17. $33 million per year, fully guaranteed, and he's been available for less than a third of the Sundays that contract was supposed to cover. Shoulder surgery. 2 Achilles tears. At some point, this stops being misfortune and starts being a pattern. And Jimmy Haslam is not a man who absorbs that financial weight indefinitely without demanding something real in return. The pressure on Watson isn't just to perform. It's to exist on a football field in October when the games actually mean something. And there's the other layer, the one I won't skip because it makes people uncomfortable. The civil settlements. The criminal process didn't produce charges, but agreements were reached. Whatever your personal interpretation of that is, however you process the complexity, it doesn't disappear. It follows him into every facility, every press conference, every snap. I've watched this man play since his high school days in Georgia. I know what he's capable of with a football, and I can hold both of those truths in my hands at the same time. What I'll say is this. There's a mental stillness to what I'm watching from him in these OTAs that's hard to articulate. Like a man who spent a full year on the sideline, nothing to do but heal and think and watch other people play the game that defines him, and came out the other side of it with some kind of private resolution. That energy is not easy to perform across multiple practice sessions in front of real defenders. I'm noting it, but a lead in May is a data point, not a verdict. It has never been a verdict. Because what the tape actually remembers about Deshaun Watson under real pressure is a recognizable pattern. When the pocket collapses and the rush arrives and the quarterback has to hold it and trust his repaired body while contact is incoming, that is when things have broken down. Not every time, but enough times that it became identifiable. The early movement, the feet getting nervous before the threat even fully materializes. That is a mental scar from injury, and the question is not whether he can command a clean pocket in Cleveland in May. The question is whether that scar stays buried when a 300-pound edge rusher is coming off his blind side in a late October game with playoff implications on the line. Shedeur Sanders does not carry that scar. He is 22 years old, walking into those huddles with a freshness and a confidence that the coaching staff has publicly acknowledged, and these are coaches who do not hand out compliments as a courtesy. Todd Monken has made it clear he will call things embarrassing when they're embarrassing. He is not a keep-the-temperature-down type. He is loud when the effort doesn't match the moment. And Shedeur is operating inside that demanding environment with a composure that doesn't come from someone who feels out of place. Even Mary Kay Cabot, who was questioning Shedeur's pre-snap processing as recently as last year, came out of day 3 with a noticeably different tone. Said the quarterbacks were doing well in the install. Said things looked efficient. That shift doesn't happen because a reporter decided to be generous. It happens because something on the field earned a different observation. And the interceptions, let me address those quickly because the internet did what it always does. The picks we've seen across these sessions have been deflections and tip plays, multi-contact chaos that doesn't tell you anything meaningful about a quarterback's decision-making. They're noise, but the reaction to them? That's not noise. When Shedeur threw one, it was clipped and posted everywhere within minutes. When Watson threw his, people in the fan base were doing forensic detective work, matching shorts to establish basic attribution. Think about what that means. A curated media feed does not look like objectivity, and the reporters with grass on their shoes watching every single rep are not telling the same story as the content that made the editorial cut. If you're locked in on this Browns quarterback situation and you want to stay ahead of every development as we move through the rest of this spring into training camp, make sure you're subscribed to Browns Today updates and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel keep going. Because here's where we're heading. 1 week left of this spring session, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and every rep from here compounds into training camp, into preseason, into the hardest decision this front office has faced in years. Because the real question being asked inside that facility right now isn't which quarterback looks better in May. It's what kind of franchise Cleveland actually wants to be. Whether they make the decision that matches what their own eyes are telling them, or the decision that feels safer, because it was made for them 3 years ago by a contract that was never really about winning football games. That question is sitting in the middle of that building right now, and everybody inside those walls knows it.